Hey, with us once again, everybody, is Mark Collinsworth of Vere Global Financial Wealth Management, an expert in finance and also keeps a sharp eye on politics because politics always does influence finance. Now, Mark, you said two events this week that are significant. First, the stock market tanked, and you're going to tell us what that is an indicator of. And then also more indications that the Feds will be lowering interest rates before the election. So we'll talk about what effect that'll have on the election in November. So first, what happened with the stock market this week?
Thank you, Larry. So this week, we had the Federal Reserve meeting on Wednesday, and they basically sent, we'll say, a fairly good, strong message on the way they worded their language in the interview that they're probably looking at cutting interest rates in September. And of course, they had the market up 100 points on Wednesday. Then Thursday, some economic data came out. Economic data was very, very bad. People are now starting to speculate, well, maybe if the Fed's wait until September, based on the economic data that came out on Thursday, maybe they waited too late. That sent the stock market down and sent bond yields plummeting. Then yesterday, the unemployment numbers came out. Unemployment numbers were really bad also. And this is what's called the SOM indicator. That's SAHM, SOM indicator. It's basically a measure of how much has the unemployment rate risen over the last 3 months, how quickly it's risen over the last 3 months. And historically, it's an indication that once that indicator is hit, you normally fall into a recession within the next 2 or 3 months.
Really? So you think a recession is on its way and fairly shortly?
Well, out of the last 11 recessions that we've had, the SOM indicator did kick in. Out of those 11, 10 of those times the SOM indicator activated, there was a recession that started within 2 to 3 months. And there was one time out of the 11 where it actually started 6 months later.
Okay, now how will the Fed's indication that it'll be lowering interest rates, how will that affect it? Will that counteract the progress towards a recession, the march towards a recession?
Well, since the Fed basically said they're that an interest rate cut is on the table for September, well, we have to wait all through the an entire month of August. So people are thinking that's too long to wait. Plus, if they make an emergency cut, that's going to really send people into panic mode on why are you cutting in between meetings. And yes, if they cut interest rates in September, that will cause the stock market to rally, possibly, and that will probably help out whoever's in the office.
All right, so in other words, it could turn out well for Kamala Harris and the Democrats.
In getting the election, what's bad about this is normally when the Fed cuts interest rates, it normally takes about 6 months for that rate cut to actually work its way into the economy. So even if they do cut rates in September, it won't actually have a real impact on the economy until well after the election. However, it will help out the stock market in the short term. And there is an indicator out there based on the performance of the stock market between the beginning of September and election day. If the stock market is positive, the incumbent party retains the White House. And if the stock market's negative, the incumbent party will lose the White House.
So how likely is it that the stock market will rally before the election?
I am going to probably say that if, unless the Fed aggressively cuts rates, I will say the stock market probably will not rally between now and election day.
So what's the probability that they will aggressively cut rates?
I don't think they will aggressively cut rates. They will cut rates, but I don't think they'll do it aggressively because if they do cut rates, everyone's going to view the Fed as being biased in a political election. I mean, the Fed's always tried to avoid doing anything with interest rates during an election year. So no matter how you cut it, the Fed's going to catch flack for what they do in September.
So balancing all this, what does it equate to? A victory for the Democrats or a defeat?
I think the Democrats will probably get elected no matter what, basically because you look at some of the things that they do like to cheat. They believe in drop-off ballots. They believe in no regulations on the drop-off ballots. Just a few months ago, one of the I think it was Michigan or Wisconsin, they found that there was something like 20,000 people that had died that still registered to vote in the elections, and they asked them to remove it. The GOP asked them to remove them, and the Democratic state representative was like, "No." I guess did people have the right to vote too, Larry?
Well, Mark, there's no good reason to deny a good Democrat his vote just because he died, don't you think?
Well, I know, and that's why I've already made plans. I want to have it put on my tombstone. Please don't let me vote Democrat now that I'm dead.
Very funny. You also said that illegals are voting.
Oh yeah, there was I forget I think it's the Heritage Foundation this week had done an undercover interview. They were interviewing illegal immigrants in Georgia, and out of the sampling of the people they interviewed, about 15% of the illegal immigrants were registered to vote in federal elections, presidential election included there. It's federal, and you do the math. There's roughly about what I think 600,000 illegal immigrants they believe that's in Georgia. Well, if you do the math, if 15% is a good sampling of that entire 600,000, that's nearly 90,000 illegal immigrants that can vote in a presidential election. And let's not forget, Donald Trump only lost Georgia by 10,000 votes.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Okay. Good to note that. All right, let's set the election results aside with the stock market, the influence on that. And in terms, since you're a financial advisor, you handle a lot of people's money. Uh, what's your game plan now, considering where we're headed in terms of a recession? What are you telling your clients?
Well, I like to raise cash, and the reason why I've been raising cash over the last several months is one, we have an inverted yield curve.
Uh,
Anytime
explain that.
the inverted yield curve is when short-term interest rates are greater than long-term interest rates. So right now you can go like a 3-month T-bill is yielding about 5%, but the 30-year treasury bond is only yielding about 4%. So that means the yield curve's inverted.
Right.
Historically, that's one of the very few indicators that has had 100% accuracy in predicting recessions. Now, the funny thing about this, if you go back through for the month of July, the yield curve inverted back here in, I believe, in 2022. So this will actually be the longest time. So if we don't fall into a recession right now, if we don't enter a recession right now, this will be the longest period on the history books that you've had an inverted yield curve without there being a recession.
So most probably, according to history, there will be a recession.
There should be a recession where the tricky part's at, and this is one of the reasons why recessions in election years are it's you don't usually see a recession in an election year. If you do see them, it usually means they're really, really bad. 2008 is a perfect example. The 1930s is also a perfect example. And the reason why is because just think between on the presidential election between the two candidates, they're going to basically spend roughly $2 billion in the next 2 months. That's going to go into the economy. That's not talking about this how much Senate that for the Senate races, how much money the Senate races are going to pump into the economy, or local elections, mayor, school attendants, governors. Talking about several $1 billion being injected into the economy on election campaigns in over the next 100 days. That historically has held up the economy, and that's also, with that being said, once the elections are over, that money stops getting invested back into the economy. And it's not a coincidence that out of the last 11 recessions that you've had, 9 of those recessions occurred in the first 2 years of a new presidential term.
All right. So therefore, wrapping this all up now, well, again, so what are you doing with people's accounts now? Are you going to cash or what?
We've been raising cash. We've been scaling back on some of the stronger runners. Some of the tech stocks have had bigger running ups. We've been reducing over the last several months. We've been reducing our positions, and I'd like to say that we probably we're spot on, because it was actually revealed today when Warren Buffett actually cut his Apple position in half over the last 3 weeks, and now is sitting on a whopping $277 billion in cash.
Okay. So therefore, Mark, wrapping this up now, uh, if there's a recession before the election, it's going to be mild, but then it will get worse after the election, most probably.
Correct. Correct. Probably what you're looking at going into the recession, I mean, going into the election, you probably will have a very, very mild recession, and will probably get a little bit worse at the beginning of next year.
Okay. And again, your prediction is that the Democrats will win the presidential election.
Yeah, I'm going to have to stick by that just simply because a lot of people vote Democrat I mean, they're just programmed to vote Democrat and they don't really listen to the underlying issues.
Plus the cheating factor, you say.
There's a large cheating factor there. I mean, people say that, Donald Trump says that the election was stolen. I don't know if stolen is probably a good word. Unfair is definitely right. I mean, a lot of the rules and regulations that governed the elections in previous elections outside of 2020 were completely ignored. That might not be stealing, but it certainly wasn't fair based on the elections you've had over the last 50 years for presidents.
And you think we're going to see at least some of that again?
Oh yeah, the issue I have with the drop boxes, where you can basically fill out your ballot and walk up to a mailbox and drop that ballot in. You don't know who voted. I mean, anyone could vote, and I'm sure in California you probably saw that one person that got caught with what was it? Was 10,000 ballots that she was trying to drop into different ballot boxes across the state of California. I mean, where'd she get 10,000 ballots? Those 10,000 ballots that voted.
Well, I know for a fact, at least in my part of Pennsylvania, there were a number of people that Republicans that were sent unsolicited mail-in ballots. They never asked for them. They received them in the mail. Since they never asked for them, never requested them, and intended to vote in person, they just tossed them aside and dumped them, whatever. Then they came to vote personally, and they had to vote provisionally because they didn't return their mail-in ballot, which they never requested. The provisional ballots is a whole separate operation to get their ballot into the polling place, and then who knows what happens to those provisional ballots. So I mean, that irregularity I could confirm. I know that. And how widespread it was, I don't know. In other parts of Pennsylvania, although I've heard in our area there was more of that. Other parts I don't know about. Other states I don't know about. But that was one irregularity that I witnessed personally.
Well, I'll give you one of the irregularities. I think this is in Nevada. So under Nevada state constitution, if you want to vote absent ballotee, you have to send in a request. So you have to fill out a form to request to send in. They then send you the ballot, and you then mail that back in. So under the Nevada Constitution, when you count those votes, you have to have the request form for the absentee vote, and you have to have the actual vote. If you don't have those two pieces of paper in front of you, you cannot count that vote under Nevada law. Well, guess what? During 2020, the Nevada government sent out absentee votes to everybody in the state of Nevada. So you had people that mailed in. Under state law, if you don't have the form that requested it, that ballot is not a legitimate vote. So why did they count the votes when they only had one piece of paper and not the two pieces? I don't understand that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, anyway, we'll see how it turns out. Mark Collinsworth of Vere Global Wealth Management. Thanks once again for your analysis of of things that affect us directly, affecting us now and will affect us in the future. We'll be talking more. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.